All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry about the delay. Um, I had, amidst making coffee and having a late lunch, I learned that Nick Fuentes had been caught with, I guess, pornography involving a trans person in an open tab while they were looking at their YouTube analytics, and I just couldn't stop laughing. It's just objectively one of the funniest things I've seen. Couldn't happen to a more appropriate person. Not that there's anything intrinsically funny about that. It's intrinsically funny that it was Nick Fuentes. If anyone can't read between the lines there. Well, not read between the lines. You get it. So what are we doing? We are looking at... Oh, that is a lovely still. He was really... I'm generally against commenting on people's appearances, but man... This has been an unkind few years to this guy. Like, good God, he's aged 20 years and 5. Anyways, apparently Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson, geriatric kooks from another time, had, I guess now geriatric, he didn't look that old before, had a discussion involving, according to this, psychedelics, consciousness, and artificial intelligence. Very strange. If you heard an echo, you did hear an echo, because my phone was on with this very stream on it. Because I am organized, and I know what I'm doing at a technical level. So, anyways. Could you turn up the volume a bit? Am I quiet? It's showing me as in the yellow here. I think I'm fairly loud. No, I think the audio is good. If anything, I might need to turn it down, at least according to my meters on this end. All right. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into this.
Audio only, as was the agreement, and it starts rather
Oh, hang on. We'll start.
Hello, everyone. A while back, and
Hi,
that would
Peter.
be November of 2021, I had the distinct pleasure
Wait,
of
no,
having a
Jordan.
discussion with Dr. Richard Dawkins,
It's not Peter. Peter Peterson. Hello, Jordan.
who, apart from being an esteemed evolutionary biologist and theorist, is also one of the world's foremost atheists. We danced back and forth for quite a while on Gmail before agreeing to meet, and our meeting, I think, was really productive. So I have a recording of it, audio only, as was the agreement, and it starts rather abruptly as we entered right into a discussion, and it ends abruptly in a sense too, because we ran out of our time without running out of topics. And so I walked over to, as it turned out, a chapel on the Oxford campus, and that wasn't a place that Dr. Dawkins wanted to go with me, so that's where it ended. In any case, we had a wide-ranging conversation. I found him charming and erudite and intelligent and a man of goodwill, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So I hope you enjoy it too. And I hope that there's more of it, because we have a lot more to talk about. I feel that way, and I think perhaps he did by the end of our conversation. So enjoy. Almost 100% of the conversations that I have with people on the street are very, very positive.
Yeah.
I would say it's 1 in 5,000 that isn't.
Yes.
But
It only takes one.
yes, and there's no shortage of
Yeah.
trouble.
What's the motivation of the few who are hostile?
That's a good question, isn't it? Because you could think about that as sort of a general metaphysical question. You know, what's the motivation of the few who are truly hostile? I think often they have me confused with a figment of their imagination.
Sure.
You
Yes.
know, so when you sent me one of your papers on biological sex. Well, stating what you stated in that paper is already enough in the current world to make you very unpopular with a certain class of people.
regardless of why you think
Can someone link me this paper so I know what I'm dealing with? That would be helpful.
what you think or what your reasons are. When all this first exploded around me, I had released a couple of YouTube videos, 3 of them, I think, decrying a bill, C-16, that was passed by the Canadian Parliament.
President Sunday, the evidence that Nick Fuentes saw transport is weak if you read the original Kiwi Farms post. I choose to believe, Max, okay?
Parliament, which mandated pronoun use. And for me, it had nothing to do with the transgender issue, or maybe it did peripherally as a political issue, you know, and maybe as a psychological issue, because the transgender issue is very complicated if you're a psychopathologist. But for me, it was just compelled speech. It's like, I don't care what your reason is. I am not saying the words I am legally obligated to say. And the case I made on YouTube was, well, first, the American Supreme Court had made compelled voluntary speech. They declared it unconstitutional in 1942. And second, there was never a common law jurisdiction in the entire world that ever compelled speech for any reason.
Is Canada the only country that does that?
What this literally amounted to, by the way, was that if you are an employer, if you're a supervisor, you can't, against the wishes of an employee or a coworker, start aggressively using pronouns other than what they've given you, which is aggressing on a coworker. This is not controversial.
That does
Not
this?
really.
That's a good question.
Nobody is going to prison in Canada over misgendering people.
I don't know.
I don't know of
I
any
know
other.
the United States doesn't.
Yes.
We've also had this in Canada, this proliferation of these so-called human rights commissions, which are like a quasi-judicial inquisition system that have been taken over completely by the woke types. And so there was a restaurant in Vancouver quite recently where the man who owned it, although he seemed to have done backflips to satisfy this angry, hypothetically transgender individual he'd employed, he was fined something like $35,000 and forced to take this, you know, these mandatory sensitivity training programs.
As someone who back in the day got into fights all the time with a lot of the representatives of the local advocacy groups, nothing happened. There's literally nothing. And it's, again, when you look at even back in like the 2016 era, or I guess it'd be 2015, when you had all of these like sit-ins and whatnot, and a bunch of like teachers leaving their schools or getting confronted by activists or whatever, it was always students acting by themselves doing so. You know, exercising their free speech in an extraordinarily annoying way, but just doing that. Hypothetically, I'm not going to be able to catch everything in this. It's going to be... I'm not going to lie, I'm already kind of glazing over. This is going to be an hour of incoherence. Actually, oh, he has chapters. This is useful. Maybe we can skip the worthless stuff. Not that I expect there's going to be anything about that, but... Jordan's experiences with psilocybin and yoga. Psychedelic symbolism and consciousness. God, the name is just... Female sexual selection. Dawkins' paper about the organism as a model. Is there a link to that here? That would be useful. Oh, there is. Brilliant. Okay, let's just take a look at this quickly. We'll open this in a new window, and I will open this with text. Da, 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 da. There we are. Alright, what are we looking at here? There's nothing there. Race is... It must be this one. Sex is pretty damn binary. Okay, let's look at this one. Let's... This smaller, so it's not taking up the entire screen. Let's zoom, zoom, zoom. I hate when they make them long like this. Oh, fine, I'll get even smaller. There we go. Long ago, on my father's farm, we had a particularly bumptious, mischievous, even aggressive cow called Arusha. The herdsman, musing one day on her obstreperous... Jesus Christ. Obstreperous behavior, that's wordy even for me, remarked, seems to me Arusha is more like a cross between a bull and a cow. Yes, Arusha came to mind recently when I was interviewed by Josh Glancy of the Sunday Times. The interview was supposed to be on my new book, Flights of Fancy, about all the ways birds, bats, pterosaurs, insects, and humans can defy the mundane pull of gravity. But in addition, perhaps pressed by his editor to deliver the kind of clickbait to which birds and bats cannot rise, Glancy mentioned that I had been publicly disowned by the American Humanist Association. Having named me as the Humanist of the Year in 1996, they retrospectively negated the honor in 2021. The reason? A tweet inviting discussion about the habit of identifying as. Oh, this is the Rachel Dolezal thing. Okay. Is that what Peterson was talking about? Hang on, let me double check this. Because the link doesn't actually take us directly to about the organism as a model. But okay, hang on. I don't know if this is the article. All I know is the link we were initially given doesn't take us there. Oh, it does actually to the top here. That's page 2. Page 1. There's no article here called "The Organism as a Model," so I'm assuming it was that one. Okay. The binary nature of sex very nearly handed Charles Darwin the key to discovering the genetic laws, now correctly attributed to Gregor Mendel. Yeah, but the issue isn't that sex isn't a binaristic relationship of a kind, where you have like a pair of sets that need to engage with each other to reproduce the species. The point is that sex characteristics are first of all identified as such culturally, but also are emergent as a result of concentrations of chemicals that can be greater or less. So that there's like literally a physical spectrum. That's why intersex people are possible. Oh, you can't see the article. Oh, sorry. So many damn buttons. So I'm just trying to skim through this fast so we can get back to the program. This is a terrible article. Like yeah, whatever. We'll get back to the actual thing. There's nothing here.
Was this in Canada?
That's in Canada, yeah. Vancouver's a major city on the west coast. And so, I was assured when I voiced my opposition, I said, well, this is illegal. And he said, well, nothing will happen if you don't comply. And I thought,
What the hell with that?
well, what do you mean nothing will happen?
Yes,
It's
yes.
illegal.
Yes, quite.
Nothing will.
Yeah.
So how can you possibly say nothing will happen? But that wasn't the point for me either. Well, I made these videos. At the same time, I made a video because the University of Toronto was implementing mandatory racial sensitivity training. And I know the literature pertaining to the implicit association test, let's say, which is the test that all these half-wit HR types use to diagnose your implicit bias. And then they want to train you with explicit training techniques to reduce your bias, which can't work if their theory is correct, because it takes massed practice to change or eliminate implicit bias. And then there's no evidence whatsoever that the training programs work, and some evidence
It takes mass practice to eliminate. What?
that they're actually counterproductive. And the implicit association test, which is essentially used as a
CMS.
diagnostic instrument, has neither the predictive validity nor the retest reliability to be used in an ethical manner as a diagnostic test, which I also said in these videos. And so that caused a lot of trouble. And I didn't really expect it, you know. I mean,
Well, why should you? It's perfectly reasonable. I just want to say I admire your courage in speaking out about this, because a huge number of people, including me, totally agree with you, and many, many of them are just too frightened to say so, because they have been intimidated. There's massive intimidation going on, especially in the academic world.
yeah.
And you're one of the few people who's actually stood up to this intimidation, and I wish to salute you.
Well, thank
for
you.
that.
That's very much appreciated. Well, I understand, because I've studied it a lot, why people are intimidated. You know, I've talked to conservative politicians.
By the way, you understand, of course, that the implication that all of these... There are an awful lot of professors, apparently, people in positions of power who hold views similar to Jordan Peterson and Dr. Richard Dawkins on... I don't know why I'm saying Dr. Richard... On Richard Dawkins on this issue. I'm reading the thing as I'm going through. The actual authoritative positions in the universities are stacked with people of this description. It is a very small number of departments that are thoroughly saturated with, I guess, generally left-wing or progressive academics. When you look at the emergence of a lot of departments, if you look at the histories of a lot of these departments and how they were finally granted, I know in my university, some of them appeared as the result of abuse scandals or prospective or alleged abuse scandals. No idea if they were true or not, but it's a little bit of a strange conciliation to give somebody an entire department. Or Dawkins means people in general. I know Dawkins means people in general.
All over Canada and the United States, although I also talk to, particularly in the States, moderate Democrat types a lot. But the conservatives, especially in Canada, they're absolutely terrified that if they make any conservative pronouncements, that they'll be singled out and mobbed. And it's unbelievably unpleasant. I mean, not to mention potentially dangerous. I mean, I was careful in what I did. See, I worked as a clinician for 20 years, and I helped people negotiate unbelievably stressful situations, you know, where their careers were on the line.
Oh, this is so boring. What else is here? Okay, postmodernism, Lacan, Foucault. Jordan addresses Dawkins' assertion that despite... What's the point to labeling these things if they're so long they won't even show up? Are there timestamps? There are. Okay, here we go. Oh god, I just realized this is an hour-and-a-half long debate between Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson. This is going to be so boring. Ugh. Michaela's Oxford Union debate? Is that... That's Jordan Peterson's daughter, right?
These places of trouble that are physiological.
Yes.
And that I can explore them. And the question is, well, how deep down, first of all, what is that exploratory
That's
capacity? And then
perfectly plausible.
how far down can you go?
That is perfectly plausible.
Yes.
I wouldn't object to that. Also, I wouldn't wish to pin you down on what was a sort of throwaway speculation on the DNA, but it does seem to me that that's kind of representative of what I mean by being drunk on symbols.
Yes.
It's not a debate, it's like a discussion where Dawkins gets confused. Okay.
It's
I'll tell you what, we'll watch this section. If it doesn't pick up, we'll do something else, because I'm already... My brain is melting here. I'm sure there's something else that Peterson's done that's more interesting. This is so dull. This is what you guys do with your free time.
well, you are rightly hostile to postmodernism, and
I'm not hostile to the postmodernist claim that there's a terrible problem that arises when you understand that there's an indefinite number of interpretations of things.
yes,
They got that right. But what I'm really hostile to is the answer.
okay,
I think that's...
The answer?
okay.
The official postmodernism TM answer?
Look,
Yep.
I want to put to you. I've got one of my.
Also, the problem with postmodernism is not that there are different vantage points from which you can assess things. The problem with postmodernism is that we realize, among other things, that our linear notion of ideas of advancement as progressing from there and going to there are contingent on accidents. And so you need to you realize that the Earth orbits the sun, not the sun the Earth, and you have to figure out how, how to orient yourself in a world in which there are no baked in right or wrong answers. That's in and even that I don't like, because that's overly simplistic, and that's in itself, again, doing precisely that. But there's a line in Nietzsche where it's something to the effect of, if you think the stars are above you, then you're not a philosopher. Something like that. I'm butchering that. It's been a hot minute since I've read Beyond Good and Evil, but it's... God damn, this is so dumb.
Books here.
Now, I've talked too much during this discussion so far. There's something I really want to ask you about, if you don't mind.
Well, yes, but before
Yes.
that, just pursue this
Okay.
matter a little
Okay.
bit. I can read this out.
Okay,
because
okay.
We're on audio
Sure.
anyway. This is one of my. It's my only written attack on postmodernism, and this is from Lacan, who says, by calculating that signification according to the algebraic method used here, namely capital S signified over little s signified equals little s the statement, with s equals -1, produces a square root of -1. Lacan then goes on to conclude that the erectile organ, the penis, is equivalent to the square root of -1 of the signification produced above, of the jouissance that it restores by the coefficient of its statement to the function of lack of signifier, -1. Then another quote from a feminist thinker. Well, this is actually an interpreter of hers, her expositor, Catherine Hales, talking about why fluid mechanics is difficult to understand. And she says, the privileging of solid over fluid mechanics, and indeed the inability of science to deal with the turbulent flow at all, she attributes to the association of fluidity with femininity. Whereas men have sex organs that protrude and become rigid, women have openings that leak menstrual blood and vaginal fluids. From this perspective, it is no wonder that science has not been able to arrive at a successful model for turbulence. The problem of turbulent flow cannot be solved because the conception of fluids and of women have been formulated so as necessarily to leave unarticulated remainders. So
Okay. So I'm going to play devil's
this is
advocate.
drunken
which I hate.
symbolism.
Okay. So let's take that apart two ways.
Okay.
Okay. The first is let's deal with Lacan.
Okay.
Okay. Lacan is a fraud, as far as I'm concerned.
Glad you say that.
Well, I've tried to read Lacan.
Yeah.
And I cannot make heads or tails of him.
Good.
And
I don't doubt that for a second. I do. Unimpeachable statement by Jordan here.
it may be because I'm stupid,
It's not.
but I don't think so. Now, people have accused Jung of the same sort of mysticism that Lacan engages in, but I can understand Jung. I don't think he's a mystic at all. What Jung was doing is very complicated, and it maps very nicely onto evolutionary biology. Of all the French intellectuals that I've read, I think Lacan is the most fraudulent.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just put him aside.
You didn't comment on him at all. You just said he's a fraud. Like, demonstrate that you've read anything by him. What are you talking about?
Good.
And you know, I haven't read that much Lacan, partly because I can't. Now, I've read a lot of Foucault, and I'm rereading The Order of Things.
A lot of Foucault, huh? He's rereading The Order of Things. Rereading it.
And The Order of Things, I would say if you're writing a book about modeling, as well as reading the neuropsychology of anxiety, The Order of Things is very much worth reading.
Okay.
And he doesn't wander off into ideological. I've only found that he made one mistake in the first half of the book. Because Foucault is a social constructionist to a large degree. But he does talk about it's categories of the imagination. That's not exactly the phrase he uses. But he does make reference at one point to the fact that our conceptual structures are grounded in an underlying imagination, which to me is a nod to biology. And so, but
What?
I like The Order of Things.
What does
I
that
read it
mean?
a long time ago. I'm just rereading it now. So forget about Lacan.
Yeah.
The feminist. Now, I'm going to argue from the perspective of a
Just forget. You haven't commented on anything Lacan said. I don't know what any of that meant. He didn't say anything. Well, let me comment first on Lacan. Lacan is a fraud. Unlike Foucault, who in The Order of Things says stuff is grounded in imagination, which is a nod to biology. But let's forget about Lacan and move on. What even happened just now? Did he just have a stroke? Like, what was that?
biologist here, I would say. I'm going to give the devil her due in this
Okay,
case.
fine.
We do have a proclivity to map sexual relationship onto the world. And the degree, for obvious reasons, because we have to perceive sexual relationship at a very deep level. We do have a tendency to animate things or to perceive them as if they're animated. And the degree to which those a priori perceptual proclivities might bias what would otherwise be objective thinking is open for valid discussion. Now, that doesn't mean that, look.
Can anyone reproduce for me in a coherent sentence what the flying fuck I just heard?
My daughter last night was engaged in a debate at the Oxford Union, and that
Wait, is this a different recording? What just happened? No, that's continuous. He just switched tones and to a completely different topic, unrelatedly. Okay.
I was there.
you were there.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Well, you heard Carol.
Yeah.
Well, that was a mind-boggling performance as far as I was concerned. It was exactly the example of the sort of thing that you're tossing out. It was absolutely beyond comprehension. I was so happy to be there because I thought I had never heard all of that expressed and simultaneously invalidated so effectively. But you know, the side she argued for won by the vote.
I didn't know which side won?
The side, the we should move beyond me
Yes,
side.
okay.
And now, independent of the merits of the underlying argument,
Yes.
Hang on, let me find this. Let me find this Michaela Peterson at Oxford thing. I just want to know what the hell he's talking about, because he can't reproduce anything to save his life. On meat. Okay. It's not very long. Okay, full debate is here. Oh, they cut it up. Why don't do that, guys? Ugh, I hate the Oxford Union so much. All their debates are garbage. Alright, what am I looking at here?
The debate. Now I look to Michaela Peterson to continue the case for opposition.
I'm Michaela Peterson, and it's my pleasure to oppose the House's motion that we should move beyond meat. I rewrote my entire speech an hour ago and decided just to embrace my story because my life isn't actually focused on spreading a meat diet around. I have a podcast and other things to do, but I live this every day, so I'm here to talk about it. I'll start with my absolutely absurd health experience that's received widespread negative media attention, on top of being fairly unpleasant to live through.
It doesn't matter. You're one person, okay? So there's a minority of people who supposedly, according to you, can only eat meat without being in excruciating pain constantly. Like, okay, but we're not talking about whether you should move beyond meat. It's whether we should move beyond meat. And obviously not categorically away from animal products, because we need them at the moment. Like, that's a different question. The question here is literally just meat. Like a lot of vegans would be satisfied with simply cutting down, like just mass animal agriculture. Like it's not even necessarily with respect to killing animals categorically. Most vegans are against that, but like I've talked to people who are like, it's not even the ethical issue per se. It's the environmental and the you know, it's more complicated than that. She's not even a philosopher who cares about dietary benefits of eating meat. I don't know. I don't care. I thought it was going to be more interesting this. He's bringing up the fact that Michaela was debating at Oxford. These debates are always so lame. And they're always between dumb people who are only listened to because they're celebrities for extrinsic reasons. Like, they're lame. Oxford debates are never good.
Except for Carol's, the fact that that feminist scholar who attributed meat eating to white supremacist patriarchal oppression,
Yeah.
that argument was so appalling at so many
I
levels.
must have missed that. Was that the final one? Right at the end?
Oh, you missed it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. It's too bad. You really needed to be there for that.
I left. We left when the president said the students should start talking.
Hey, that's me.
But
I see.
So okay.
You must have left just before that happened.
Yes.
Oh well,
So tell me then.
Oh my God!
missed
It was
Watch Vosh versus Hake. Oh, God.
just well that was essential.
I'll tell you what, I'll watch a bit of Vosh versus Hake after this, just as a palate cleanser.
It. That was her argument, that meat eating was a consequence of the imposition of a patriarchal, racist,
Okay.
oppressive,
Okay.
white supremacist narrative
Yes.
on essentially a feminine background.
Yes.
It's the same
okay.
thing.
Okay. Well.
Now you're saying you're saying
Okay, let's find the last one here. So the full debate is here, okay. But it's not the full debate because that's a 9-minute video. So oh, Jeff McMahon. Or McMahon? McMahon? Here we go. Carol Adams. box for debate. Meat.
Room. Now, to move not beyond meat, but move on with the debate, I call upon Kara Adams to conclude the side proposition.
Oh, here we go. Okay. This better be freaking good, Jordan.
I've read the motion, and I believe we should move beyond all meat. So, what we choose to eat has consequences far beyond the circumference of our plates. Specifically, your vote tonight expresses your allegiance to or rejection of a white supremacist patriarchal worldview. Do we vote to further inequality and sustain world-destroying violence? In the sexual politics of meat, I introduced the concept of animals as absent reference. In order to be eaten, animals must disappear as living beings, that is, be killed. They then disappear conceptually, as so many forms in which we eat animals' corpses.
Okay, if you're ever in like a public speaking capacity and you're talking to a lay or a general audience, never talk like this. Just don't. It's not smart. You look incoherent and just don't, okay? There's probably like something really like interesting behind all of this, but the language is just, you already know exactly how it's being received. She's not being listened to. What's being seen is the verbose display.
Are massaged by euphemistic language, hamburger, steak, pork, bacon, etc. Even the speaker just before me talked about turkeys. He's talking about dead butchered turkeys of whom part of their bodies will be eaten. Meat eaters order
Yes, we understand the concept of meat extraction. Thank you.
leg of lamb, not a baby lamb's leg. The animals cannot possess their own body parts. Tonight, think about how the language...
Well, it's not, it's redundant. A lamb is a baby sheep. That's why it's not a leg of sheep, it's a leg of lamb.
...which of our debate has or has not participated in the structure of the absent referent. Who disappears and why? 21st century animal eating requires our...
I don't know what on earth convinced people that this mode of delivery is good in any conceivable way. It literally does nothing but lose your audience. It lacks clarity. It's just... Now let's watch something worse, I guess.
That you don't know how much of that characterizes my thinking, despite my opposition to postmodernism.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's an absolutely reasonable question, and given that doubt, which I can certainly understand why you would hold, it's perfectly reasonable of you, and I think perspicacious, to have pointed to my attempt to speculate about how these images of intertwined...
She needs to link speciesism with white supremacy is beyond me. The way she's doing it is ridiculous. The fact that you do need colonial structures to engage in the kind of mass animal agriculture that we do now. I mean, you could link it in that way. It's just, to that audience, in that manner, I don't know why you would write that way to any audience. It lacks clarity. You're adding in a bunch of additional baggage for people to get stuck on. Like, at a certain level, do you want your argument to succeed or not?
helixes happen to propagate themselves all over the world. Because I have a problem with that, because I can't understand why that's the case. So, for example, there's a really interesting Chinese image, which is one of the ones that I referred to in that particular lecture, that shows, I hope I can remember this exactly right. So it's this intertwined underlying serpentine structure giving rise to a female and male form.
Yes.
And it's portrayed that way in the cosmogonic myth, that these forms emerge out of this underlying helical structure. But there are stories like that everywhere. And so you might say, well, it's a case of false pattern recognition, and that's really a problem, right? That's the problem of misperception.
Okay, no, wait.
How did we get to this?
I have no problem with. My big problem is equating it with DNA.
Yes.
That's bullshit. However,
Yes. Yes.
however, what might be interesting would be a commonality between myths all around the world.
How did we get to this? Why are we talking? What happened?
And then anthropologists argue about whether this is because of cross-infection of ideas or whether there's something Jungian about the...
Right.
And I think that's a genuinely interesting question.
Of course it is.
And it
Most
maybe
of
is-
the affective neuroscientists that I've met, the good ones, are tilted pretty hard towards the biological primitive argument, that there are
Yes.
forms of perception.
Yes.
Well, color is one of them. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, I think that's interesting. And of course,
What are we talking about? There's no... We were talking about Lacan, then we're talking about weirdo at the meat debate. Now we're talking... What? Please tell me Jordan B. Peterson is actually more coherent than the Oxford speaker. He is not. I could sort of follow the Oxford speaker. The Oxford speaker was saying something very obvious and basic in an overly verbose manner with a whole bunch of like political baggage attached that nobody will listen to it seriously. This is like a fever dream.
the coincidence of an image or a statue in this part of the world and that part of the world, you should think about how improbable it is that two people might have hit upon the same design. I mean, the idea
Right.
of a snake spiraling around each other, it's not that difficult to think of. It's not. It wouldn't be ridiculously improbable that two tribes on opposite sides of the world would independently come upon that.
No, and it might not point to anything particular, except that it is the use of snakes. I would say, though, the idea of that coiled snake or the dual coiled snake is also a powerful symbol of healing. And so
Yes.
that's partly why it's used as the
progressive,
symbol for
yes.
physicians. Yes, exactly. And there is the idea that's part and parcel of that, and this would be, let's say, separate from the DNA idea. Snakes shed their skin and they're reborn. And so that's part of the reason why they're symbols of
Like a phoenix.
transformation. Exactly. And that notion of death and regeneration is obviously central to the idea of healing. And so that's another explanation for the use of the snake.
Okay, so I'm interested in the improbability of coincidence in this case. Now, if
Yes.
say
What case?
people in Scandinavia and people in the Amazonian jungle had independently developed an alphabet, which was the same alphabet. Now that would be impressive. I mean, that would be
Right. Well,
my
that
goodness.
yes. Well, but
that-
it's also equally impressive that separated people did develop alphabets.
Yeah, but not the same alphabet.
No, I know they didn't use, but there's a level at which it's the same, right? Because they are alphabetic and they are the use of written forms to represent
Yes,
sounds.
well, that's
So-
a sensible thing to have, and I mean,
It
it's
is.
such a good idea that it wouldn't be improbable that two tribes would have the same idea.
That's true, but it gets complicated too. Well, it gets complicated in
What?
the context of this argument.
What is
because
complicated?
One of the debates that Foucault had that was famous was a debate with Chomsky.
Yes.
And Foucault, of course, is a radical social constructionist, except when he isn't, now and then, right? And I'm not being smart about that. The Order
No,
of
you're
Things
not.
is quite a careful book. But Chomsky was laying out a more archetypal argument in some sense, and Chomsky thinks that there is something like an underlying language grammar. And so the fact that an alphabetic structure might be discovered by two separate peoples would be partly a reflective of an underlying biological commonality. And so it is very difficult to draw a border between these. And I would also say, I agree with you completely that associative thinking of the kind that you just read to me can go far astray. What that is false
Yes, I
pattern
should say it
recognition.
can.
So it's the apperception or perhaps the projection of a pattern onto a background, let's say an underlying reality, that actually isn't characterized by that pattern. But that's actually part of the dilemma of thought, though, too, isn't it? Because
What?
I think thought is usefully parceled out into a revelatory element and a dialogical element. And so the revelatory element is, while you're sitting there and thoughts enter the theater of your imagination. And so it's in a sense, phenomenologically, like they sort of spring up from the void. And you can be struck by a thought, which is really interesting, right? It's like,
I agree.
well, it's your thought. Why are you struck by it?
Where does it
did
come from?
Yes, that's it. No kidding. Where does it come from? But then there's another element, which is, well, not all intuitions are valid. The things
I feel like I'm falling down like an endless water slide, and I'm trying to grasp for something, and just nothing's holding, and it just doesn't stop.
that strike you, even though being struck is often a pretty good indication that there's something there, but it's not always an indication. And there are certain forms of psychopathology, schizophrenia in particular. Schizophrenia is characterized by the misfiring of that intuition system. So, for example, partly what happens to people who have
Is this what gave Dawkins his stroke a little while ago? Ugh. What are the comments? They just want more, I guess.
like ideas of reference. They'll be watching television, and the latent inhibition will get stripped away from their perception of the voices. And so now the voices become magnified in significance. And to account for the magnification of emotional significance, they start thinking, the television has a special message for me. It's like the receipt of a religious revelation, and it's often accompanied by religious ideation. So it's not that uncommon, although it's somewhat uncommon, for people who are floridly schizophrenic to identify with Christ.
Sounds to me very like religious revelation.
It is
actually.
very,
Yeah.
it is very like.
But I wanted to counter because you characterize yourself as religious sometimes, and yet you don't seem to believe in a supernatural creator. I'm not
Well,
really
people
sure whether
ask
you do
me
or not.
all the time.
I know they do.
Whether I believe in God, and I say, well, I act as though God exists.
Yes, but I
Right,
mean,
which is a reference to this model idea. by the way.
last night you seem to be. Well, we come to the idea of truth. Where you seem to be saying that which is beneficial to humanity or to your reduce your anxiety or makes you feel good or reduces stress is true.
Okay, pragmatic view of truth. We have something to hook onto. Let's see where this goes.
No. It's more.
Never mind.
It's more than that. And good. I'm glad that we're on to this part of this discussion. When Darwin first published his biological treatise, The Origin of Species, the New England pragmatists got a hold of his manuscript, William James and C.S. Peirce.
Why are you telling Richard Dawkins about the publication of The Origin of Species?
And William James founded experimental psychology, and C.S. Peirce was probably the most profound philosopher the Americans ever produced. And they had a club, I think it was the psychological club. It was either that or the philosophical club, but I believe it was the psychological club. And they believed that Darwin's theorizing required a new epistemology. It was so revolutionary. And Peirce in particular, developed pragmatism.
What do you mean a new epistemology? If it required a new epistemology, how did he discover it?
And pragmatism is like an engineering truth claim. And I don't think you can be an evolutionary biologist without being a pragmatist. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's coherent conceptually. And so Peirce was trying to solve the problem of, well,
oh, no.
How can something be true when we're fundamentally ignorant?
Oh no. Oh no. Okay, let's wind back a little bit. Looks like we're doing this.
And so Peirce was trying to solve the problem of, well, how can something be true when we're fundamentally ignorant about everything in the final analysis? And the answer was,
That's not what Peirce was trying to do.
well, we have truths that are true enough. And you might say, well, what do you mean true enough? And
This is not Peirce. I don't know what the hell he's referencing. I thought he was going to go on the evolutionary love angle, but he's apparently going through the fixation of belief. This is Peirce.
the answer would be, they're true enough to be used as tools to achieve a certain end in a certain space over a certain time period.
This is like a butchery of a basic pragmatist stance. This is not Peirce.
And so your truth is true enough if it gets you from point A to B when you're using it.
Has Peterson even read Peirce? Peterson has read about as much Peirce as he's read Foucault. I don't need that.
The tool is adequate for the job if it performs the task intended. And for Peirce and the
And the...
pragmatists,
Oh, for fuck's sake.
that was it.
Peirce was not of a kind of the pragmatists. No.
There was no truth superordinate to that. Now, it's complicated because some pragmatic truths are functional across broader spans of time and space than others. So they're more like ultimate truths. But this was not a grounding of truth in a Newtonian idea or Cartesian idea, or even in an idea of objective truth, because they derived their concept of truth from their analysis of the evolutionary process. And they said,
What?
And so and I really want to know what you think about this.
Who are
It's
you
like,
talking about? Peirce?
say there's truth in the human form. Well, I'll speak metaphorically. But biologically, that truth only suffices for like 90 years. Right? We're good enough. We're good enough as a model.
It may be that
What is he talk? I don't even know like which text of Peirce he's referring to here. If he's referring to like Peirce's idea of how consciousness arises, that's... I mean, it's sort of evolutionary. It's a description of how, hang on. This is from Questions Concerning Certain Faculties Claimed for Man. I've covered this in a previous stream. Right. So Peirce's idea is that cognitions only arise from other cognitions, which results in a problem, obviously, because how the hell do you get cognitions then? And, well, what happens is you have processes, he thinks of like a triangle dipped into water. You have processes that eventually just resemble cognitions until you get one, more or less. So he has sort of an emergent theory of how cognitions come to be. And what he means by cognitions is a lot more general than what we typically mean by cognitions today. Yeah, so question 7 in Questions Concerning Certain Faculties Claimed for Man is whether there is any cognition not determined by a previous cognition. And he answers yes. So he says here, if it be objected that the... Okay, hang on, let me pull up this example. I'll just read it out. So it would seem that there is or has been, for since we are in possession of cognitions, which are all determined by previous ones, and these by cognitions earlier still, there must have been a first in this series, or else our state of cognition at any time is completely determined according to logical laws, by our state at any previous time. But there are many facts against the last supposition, and therefore in favor of intuitive cognitions. On the other hand, since it is impossible to know intuitively that a given cognition is not determined by a previous one, the only way in which this can be known is by hypothetic inference from observed facts. But to adduce the cognition by which a given cognition has been determined is to explain the determinations of that cognition. And it is the only way of explaining them. For something entirely out of consciousness which may be supposed to determine it can, as such, only be known and only adduced in the determinate cognition in question. So that to suppose that a cognition is determined solely by something absolutely external is to suppose its determinations incapable of explanation. Now, this is a hypothesis which is warranted under no circumstances, inasmuch as the only possible justification for a hypothesis is that it explains the facts, and to say that they are explained and at the same time to suppose them inexplicable is self-contradictory. If it be objected that the peculiar character of red is not determined by any previous cognition, I reply that that character is not a character of red as a cognition. For if there be a man to whom red things look as blue ones do to me and vice versa, that man's eyes teach him the same facts that they would if he were like me. Moreover, we know of no power by which an intuition could be known. For as the cognition is beginning, Peirce I'm not going to get into this because this is a whole other thing, but Peirce does not believe that intuitions are possible. Moreover, we know of no power by which an intuition could be known, for as the cognition is beginning, because the point is, again, is cognitions are all derived from other cognitions, so we don't receive things from the world as such. We have cognitions about things, and then other cognitions are downstream from that. Ambrose can kill me later for butchering this. And therefore the apprehension of it must take place in no time and be an event occupying no time. Besides, all the cognitive faculties we know of are relative, and consequently their products are relations, but the cognition of a relation is determined by previous cognitions. No cognition not determined by a previous cognition then can be known. It does not exist then, first, because it is absolutely incognizable, and second, because a cognition exists only insofar. I don't know why I'm reading this like this is going to make things any clearer. The point is, Peirce has a emergent theory of cognitions, essentially. So it's amenable to an evolutionary account. I don't know where the hell he's going with this, though.
Our knowledge of truth is incomplete, and we can never be sure of anything. But that doesn't mean there isn't truth out there.
Well, truth is a slippery concept because it can be used very many ways. And I'm not trying to, believe me, I'm not trying to bandy words about. I do not believe that the Newtonian conception of truth and the evolutionary conception of truth are commensurate. And I think the evolutionary, because, well, it's tough, right? Because you might think, well, when you're talking about truth, are you talking about the nature of ultimate reality, or are you talking about the relationship of your models to that reality?
Well, those are the same thing, because you're still making a determinate statement about ultimate reality, right? If you're a pragmatist, generally, you're not making a statement about ultimate reality at all. You're saying truths are relationships ultimately between how we speak and efficacy. That's, you don't have access to the world. Your relationship with the world is this is exhausting.
Right? I don't know that I can.
All right, hang on. Everyone stay calm. Oh my god, what is going on here? Okay, are we back? I think we're back. Frickin' YouTube. Oh boy. What does that mean, purse is inscrutable? Purse is actually fairly coherent.
Care too much about that because I mean, let me tell you something that is true.
Okay.
We are cousins of chimpanzees.
Yes.
That
Thanks,
is
Richard.
objectively true. Another thing that's true is that the Earth orbits the Sun.
Yes.
These are not. One can argue about the epistemology of that, but
You just said this objectively true. You have left no room for argument. That's what that means.
want to be a realist about this and say that there may be kinds of truth which are somehow filtered through our Darwinian past and which influence the way we see truth. And we may be deceived by all sorts of things. We may be self-deceived. But there are objective truths. It is the business of science to find them. And science has tools for stripping off subjective bias, for stripping off self-deception.
Yes.
And that's why we do double-blind trials
Absolutely.
in medicine.
It's why
and
we
so on.
use random assignation
Exactly,
group as
yes.
well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Right. And who can argue with the power of the scientific process? But I would also say that the religious people that you've debated, they lose before they open their mouths because they don't notice that you impose this realist metaphysics on the argument before it starts. Now, I'm not saying that you're not justified in doing that. I'm not saying that because that's open to question. But I am saying they don't notice that that's what's happened. But there's a problem here. It's a real problem. And this is the postmodern conundrum, I would say. It's useful and true to say that there are objective facts. But the problem is, there's an infinite number of them.
True.
Okay, so now the question is, as a scientist, how do you decide which facts to attend to? And the answer to that is, you cannot do that using the scientific process.
No, that's true.
Okay, so then the question is, look, I've done a lot of statistical analysis of data sets in my time. And when I was a naive undergraduate, and I'm not particularly mathematically gifted, by the way, statistics was quite a slog for me until I started to understand it conceptually, and then I started to enjoy it. But I kind of imagined that the data contained the information. The statistical process was an algorithm to reduce the data to the information, and it was kind of a mechanistic process. I didn't realize at all that a data set is, imagine I've had data sets that had, 5,000 participants and 200 rows of variables. It's like, there's a lot of information in that data set. And so then the question is, how the hell do you derive a valid conclusion from that plethora of information? Because you could report all sorts of meaningless correlations, right? They would be spurious, but also practically useless. And there's just endless numbers of those in the data set. How do you judiciously...
That's not what data and information mean. Data is just like the values and the facts, I guess, that you've aggregated. Information is that data contextualized into a meaningful description of something. The data doesn't, I guess in like a colloquial sense, the data can imply information, I suppose. I don't know. But that already presumes a filter.
use a statistical process to extract out the information that is what? True? Yes, but it's not just true. You want it to be useful.
I agree, yes.
Right. Okay. So that's where the pragmatism issue comes in, right? Because then we might say, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I know you care deeply about truth, and I know that you're motivated by it. And so then I would say that's a metaphysical relationship in some sense. It's an a priori metaphysical relationship because you made a commitment to truth. And I would also say that that's an act of faith, because you might ask yourself, in science, is it truth or untruth that serves the world?
Well, that's where we came back. That's where we came in, because there are all sorts of truths.
What does that mean, to serve the world? What does that even mean? Is it truth or untruth that serves the... Data and stats can be filtered. Think of survey data. Yeah, I know.
Which do not serve the world. There are all sorts of truths which are very unpleasant.
Yes.
An analogy might be, as a doctor, you have a patient who has incurable cancer, and you have to decide whether to tell that patient the truth or not.
Right.
Well, might debate this with your colleagues. And,
You might,
Your
yes.
colleagues might say, well, it's better off not telling him. It's better not knowing. So the truth in this case is not beneficial. But it's
What would you pick? What would you?
Well,
would you want to know?
That's irrelevant.
No.
I would want
You
to
would want to know.
I would want to know.
Okay. Well, but I agree that there are dangerous truths, let's say, and there are truths that.
Is this like to serve man? I mean, like maybe, but he didn't say the human world. He didn't say human beings. He just said to serve the world. Like he could mean just life at that stage, but I don't know.
Under some circumstances, might be harmful and that could be used as weapons. But I would still say, I don't believe that you can be a scientist and discover objective truth, say, in a useful manner without being committed to a metaphysical vision of the redeeming power of the truth.
This guy's a terrible Nietzschean.
Because I don't even think you can make the micro decisions that you're making while you're reading a book and sifting through it, right? Trying to separate the wheat from the
No, they're not talking about pragmatism anymore. We've moved on. We're in... I don't know where we are anymore.
chaff without... I don't want to impose this view on this conversation, right? I'm trying to explore it because I've dealt with plenty of bad scientists in my time.
I believe you.
You know, psychology is rife with what they call p-hacking, where you just run repeated correlations until you find one that...
Yeah. Oh, that's bad science.
Yes, but it's also bad, but it's bad ethics. It's like, well, why not? Look, why not do that if it advances your career?
Yes, quite. That's bad, and that's not, I think, what we're talking about. I thought you were saying that truth is that which is beneficial. In my analogy, when you're arguing with your colleagues whether to tell this patient the truth, you could very well argue, shall we tell him or shall we not? It would be beneficial not to or beneficial to. But everybody should agree that it is true that this man has cancer. That is true.
Yes, yes. Well, this is partly why this issue is so unbelievably complicated, because what you just said is true. But it's also the case that you have to apply an ethical framework onto that infinity of truths in order to focus on and communicate those. See, you've picked topics that you communicate to people, and there are other topics you didn't pick.
Yes.
And there's most of the other topics you didn't pick. And so the question to me is, and this is partly why I got interested in Jung, by the way, because he was very interested in the unconscious direction of attention. The psychoanalysts were fascinated by that. That's partly why they were interested in Freudian slips. But one thing.
Because of joy in the activity of acquisition of knowledge in a given area. And specifically the activity, not the actual finding of the information or the settling of, or the fixing of belief in Peircean terms. And that's the whole notion of science as a vocation they get from Weber, which is, again, like a thoroughly Nietzschean / Lutheran that he discovers idea. Because there's even that line from Birth of Tragedy. What is it? There would be no science if it were concerned, this is from section 15 of The Birth of Tragedy, there would be no science if it were concerned only with that one nude goddess and with nothing else, for in that case her devotees would have to feel like men who wanted to dig a hole straight through the earth, assuming that each of them realized that even if he tried his utmost his whole life long, he would only be able to dig a very small portion of this enormous depth, and even that would be filled in again before his own eyes by the labors of the next in line. So a third person would seem to do well if he picked a new spot for his drilling efforts. Now suppose someone proved convincingly that the goal of the Antipodes cannot be reached in this direct manner. Who would still wish to go on working in those old depths, unless he had learned meanwhile to be satisfied with finding precious stones or discovering laws of nature? Like that's the point, is you take joy in the activity, not in the goal. It's like it's the journey more than the destination, I guess, is a vulgar way of putting it.
We could ask, do you think that you picked your field of study, or did it pick you?
I'm not sure, but I don't think that's not relevant. It doesn't.
Well, it is. No, but it is. It has to be relevant because it's actually the question of relevance. And so there's a whole branch of cognitive science now. I'd like to have.
Look, don't read Peterson. Just read Weber's Science as a Vocation. It's got everything good that Peterson ever said right there.
You talk to this colleague of mine named John Vervaeke. John Vervaeke is unbelievably smart. And the problem he spent his whole career
And I say everything good that Peterson ever said, and it is very short.
focusing on is, how in the world do you decide what you attend to when there's an almost infinite number of things to attend
that's
to?
a big question.
It's
Of
a
course
huge
it is.
question.
And it's a question that applies to science when you decide what to work on. As you say, there's an infinite number of things you could attend to.
Well, this isn't like an epistemic problem where we have to figure this out. We already do. We just have to make a description of why we choose. And we already have descriptions of why we choose, because we like doing it. There are extrinsic reasons, other than the goal. Like, why do you breathe when you know you're going to die one day? Like doing it.
Work on, and you choose some of them, and that's a decision which people take, and that biases your view of the world and everything. But nevertheless, there is objective truth. That doesn't affect the fact there's objective truth. The mere fact that there's a very large number of things you could attend to and you have to choose one of them doesn't affect the fact that there are lots of truths out there. And
Right, but it definitely, yes, but it definitely does affect the way that science is. See, this is also why the postmodern critics have been so effective in what they've done. It's because they're pushing the notion that a narrative necessarily drives the process of inquiry, even in relationship to objective facts.
What?
I think that's true.
No, it doesn't drive the process of inquiry. It slants the process of inquiry that already has its own extrinsic drives. That's different. It's saying that your map of what is there is downstream from a set of presuppositions that don't actually hold true in as many cases as you think they do. Therefore, you should start interrogating the contingency of a lot of the stuff that you're taking for granted, and then do your science afterwards with a better understanding of the tenuousness of what it is that you're dealing with, or your conceptual framework for identifying what there is to deal with.
And that's partly what we're discussing.
Okay.
Now, I also think, and I don't know how to reconcile these things, like the fact that you're making a case for the existence of the objective fact. It's like, I'm not going to argue about that.
No Sunday because it's a calling. Yeah, but how is it determined to be a calling? It's because you have like a specific disposition to enjoy the activity, yeah? Where you can take pleasure in doing science despite the fact that you know that your work is going to be overturned by some future scientist, and that not only overturned or usurped, you will never see the result.
That doesn't mean I understand it fully, because I can't quite understand the relationship between the objective fact and the necessity for utility, and partly I can't understand that on biological grounds. Because fundamentally, when you look at things, I would say that the description of truth that you're purveying right now in this argument, I'm not trying to make it any more general than that, is not one that's well nested inside the epistemology that you would derive from evolutionary biology, because you would say, in some sense, that we're tilted in a very fundamental manner.
Why would you derive an epistemology from evolutionary biology? Hang on. Serious question. Could somebody explain that? Like, is there a point there? I'm not processing that. You require a specific epistemology in order to comprehend evolutionary biology.
To only apprehend those things that will aid survival and reproduction. And so, to hell with the objective facts.
Well, that's probably true, that our sense organs are biased towards that which helps us to survive, and our internal sense organs, so to speak, our attention mechanisms inside our thought mechanisms. So we are creatures who evolved on the African savanna and from forests earlier on, and our ability to understand the world, let alone what we attend to, is limited by that. We are blinkered by the fact that our bodies and our brains were designed to survive in Africa.
Right, well, and that's what that feminist critic was pointing to in
Well,
a very,
sure.
well...
Does evolutionary biology not have its own epistemology? Well, no, it's biology. It's not epistemology. Like, we don't get our epistemology from biology. We get our...
Let's look in an awkward and tendentious manner and an overstated manner. Absolutely.
Well,
Not as bad as
so,
Lacan,
all right,
though.
well then we are living. I don't understand quantum theory, and the reason I don't understand quantum theory from
Yes.
an evolutionary point of view is that
Exactly.
I'm not evolved.
It doesn't
to
map
understand
onto
it.
our bodies well.
Exactly, and I
Yeah.
don't. So there are what I
Okay. I think we've heard enough. I'm done. My head hurts. And not in the good way. I'm done. I'll be back in 15 minutes. I'm gonna get more coffee. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, I died of a stroke. And we're back. Hello. I feel I've made a terrible mistake. Terrible, terrible mistake. Alright. We must press on. Does Christianity cause Christian nationalism? Suppose it... Well, I was going to say as a joke, it probably doesn't cause Buddhist nationalism, but historically, actually, it probably does. This is by Inspiring Philosophy, who is... I don't know if he's worse than Jordan Peterson. My perception on that's changed a little bit over time. A special thanks to sociologist Kenneth Vaughan. Can't be good if he's helping Inspiring Philosophy. I almost said Perspective Philosophy. Perspective Philosophy could use some help from a sociologist. But what does he do? University of Texas, great. Alright, what do we got here? Let me pull this up here. Sacred ethnic boundaries, Korean American religions. Who benefits from consociation nationalism? That's a new word. Consociationalism? Consociational? Never heard of that term before. Religious moral communities or secular tolerance. Interesting. Well, depending on how much of a train wreck this is, maybe I'll go over that. In any case, this is Inspiring Philosophy on Does Christianity Cause Christian Nationalism. Let's make myself smaller so you can see the text on here. It might actually come to bear in this case. Alright. Here we go. Let me know how the audio is.
Resulted in horrible things.
Here, let's rewind a bit.
If you know your history, you know that nationalism that has become extreme resulted in horrible things. The erosion of democracy and civil liberties, authoritarianism, and the death of millions. Today we often hear in the media of the possibility of right-wing nationalism returning and could be rising among religious individuals. The fear of Christian nationalism is on the rise, and many assume the best way to handle this is to reduce Christianity, or at least its holdover people. But does the research support this? You might be surprised to find out the best way to reduce Christian nationalism is to encourage more Christianity.
What? Immediately what stands out is the assertion that there is a body of research that has reached a determination on this matter. That's news to me.
Nationalism has often been defined in different ways. In a general sense, it can refer to mere patriotism. It can mean to identify with one's own nation and support for its interests. Most people could be nationalist in this limited sense. But a more extreme version of nationalism is when one's individual loyalty and devotion to the nation state surpasses other individual or group interests.
No. The crucial point about nationalism in the modern world, and by modern I mean like 20th century and beyond, is that you presume the nation state as the relevant entity to which you can have that kind of loyalty and devotion, right? Or that you can identify with. The nation state being a kind of flattening together of the nation as demographic and the state as a territorial body. So you start to have the idea of the borders of the state as being equivalent to the extent of the nation in some key way. That's what nationalism really means in a meaningful sense today, as opposed to the nationalism of, say, the French Revolution, where it's not really nationalism as such. What it is actually is the extending of citizens' rights to all who are a part of, all who are subjects of some state or what have you. Like it's an outward facing thing as opposed to a kind of filtering mentality, I suppose. Sunday, I wanted to ask why biology doesn't have or doesn't belong to an epistemic paradigm, because it's not epistemology, it's the study of organisms.
And one thinks their nation is superior to all others in all ways. Extreme nationalism often results in authoritarianism, where a leading figure is needed to guide and direct the nation. Democratic rule becomes untrustworthy because traitors or outsiders
Hang on, I gotta rewatch that bit. He said something dumb.
surpasses other individual or group interests, and one thinks their nation is superior to all others in all ways. Extreme nationalism often results in authoritarianism, where a leading figure is needed to guide and direct the nation.
I hate this garbage, like, attempt at pretending to do political theory. Like, oh, you see, sometimes there's extreme forms of nationalism. That's double plus bad nationalism. And when you have double plus bad nationalism, there are bad guys who take over and do, like, that's literally the level of thought we're dealing with here.
Democratic rule becomes untrustworthy because traitors or outsiders could infiltrate through the government and weaken the nation.
What?
So nationalism has historically resulted in authoritarianism. Similarly, sometimes research
Authoritarianism isn't a... Authoritarianism is basically a political slur. States are by definition authoritative. You're referring specifically to a specific kind of a body with basically absolute authority. And what is authoritarian is generally... What is called authoritarian is generally that which impedes what you would like to do personally. If for whatever reason what we are impeded from doing is something that the people who are considered to matter at a given time don't care to do, then it's not called authoritarian. That's basically it. But I mean, the nature of how states enforce their own interests and maintain order, that doesn't change between a quote-unquote authoritarian and a quote-unquote not authoritarian government or whatever.
researchers talk about civilizationism, which is like nationalism, but one focuses on the whole of their civilization, like Western civilization. One views Western civilization as superior to all other civilizations, and that should be protected from outside intrusion and dominate all other cultures. Christian nationalism, or civilizationism, generally is understood to mean that Christian values and doctrines
Oh my god, what the he introduced a new term. Civilizationism. One focuses on the whole of their civilization. Like, what the What is... It doesn't mean anything. What does the whole of their civilization mean? Like what, the inherent superiority of Dostoevsky and pizza? Like what does this mean?
Western civilization. One views Western civilization as superior to all other civilizations.
I know it's made up. It's because it's just nothing but schematism. It's like, well, what is he just again assumes like the basic category. There's nation states around, and nationalism is idolizing the nation state. And then what's nationalism but bigger? Civilizationalism, clearly. It's dumb.
And that should be protected from outside intrusion and dominate all other cultures. Christian nationalism, or civilizationism, generally is understood to mean that Christian values and doctrines should have power over the state and culture. The nation and culture should be defined by aspects within Christianity, and the government should be active in enforcing this.
Which is, by the way, intrinsically already the case, because the liberal political or the public-private divide that we get from liberal attitudes towards the state is entrenched.
Through things like having Christian symbols in public spaces, laws based on values found in Christianity, or forcing children to pray in schools. Immigration is also discouraged, as one doesn't want outsiders to come in, bringing in their own cultural values and altering the Christian nation from within. To quote from one paper, Christian nationalism is described as
Oh, hey, Echo, how are you doing?
a cultural framework concerned with national heritage.
Disagree sounds like a genetic fallacy. No, because when you're talking about the liberal state, you're specifically talking about a state that is built on a model, downstream again from Christian-derived presuppositions about the appropriate limits of government authority. So you can't what? Oh, with this video, yeah. Oh, inspiring philosophy. He's bizarre. This is weirdly probably one of the most grounded videos he's done.
Boundary drawing, social order, embattlement, and conquest. Christian nationalism does not necessarily mean the goal is evangelism, or developing Christian beliefs in individuals, or encouraging people to be more religious or devout. There are many individuals in research that are quite secular in their beliefs, but are still considered Christian nationalists. This is because it focuses more on how the nation or culture as a whole is presented. We should project that we are defined by Christian symbols and rituals. Christian nationalism may be politically salient outside of devout Christian circles, beyond the Christian traditions of its origin, and in a wide range of contexts. The assumption of many is that adherence to Christian nationalism is a result of more people affirming Christian religiosity. If we reduce the number of Christians in society, or reduce the hold Christianity has on people, Christian nationalism will decrease. But the research indicates the opposite is true. Recently, a study conducted in the US from 2021 found that among politically right individuals, Christian nationalism was found among those who were the least religious. To quote, "We find no evidence that Christian nationalism mobilized church-based support in the election. This is demonstrated by the fact that in our results, Christian nationalism is only strongly associated with Trump support for voters who do not attend religious service. Among religious attenders, the effect of Christian nationalism on Trump voting is not only weak, it is also not statistically..."
I agree, but most arguments for liberalism can replace God-given rights on different assumptions. No, I'm not saying that they're I'm not saying that a consciously Christian view maintains over time. What I'm saying is that the categories that we have are derived from those. So there's a cultural contingency on Christian history. I'm not saying it's Christian in the sense of like you would call an individual subject a Christian, if that makes sense. Like obviously you can have the concept apart from Christian belief, but the point though is that it's derived from, or I guess it's discovered through Christian frames of reference. But the latter's thrown away now. Like we don't believe that anymore, or it's not required in order to hold these categories. But the categories themselves are gained by that. That's the point I'm making.
different from zero. White nationalist groups in the United States explicitly use Christian nationalist rhetoric, but those who identify with such movements tend to not be strongly involved in mainstream Christian congregations.
I mean, the problem here is you need to have like a firm idea of what these mean, what these refer to. Like, I don't know what they're calling Christian nationalism in the study. I'm assuming they're using the same definition that inspiring philosophy uses, but his categorization scheme is bad.
So according to the research, Christian nationalism is more of a politically motivating force for the unchurched, and it seems to thrive with secular.
Right, but then I don't know what the disagreement is. Is it just that conceptually liberalism would never be thought of or be unlikely on an island independently of contact of people who know it? Yes, that's exactly what that's what the disagreement is.
Another study found that although populist radical right parties of Europe tend to advertise themselves as defending Christian identity and values, they are unlikely to attract religious Christian voters. Populist radical right parties take pains to show that they are defenders of Christian identity and values, and yet they do not widely attract religious Christian voters. Our analyses confirm that paradox. As religiosity increases, the odds of voting for a PRR party instead of a mainstream right party decline. Additionally, it was found that anti-religious sentiment, has been found to be more distressing to individuals who do not attend regular church service. And unchurched Christian nationalists are more likely to favor an authoritarian figure using populist appeals. The Social Capital Community Benchmark Survey showed that the biggest gap in volunteering and charitable giving is between...
Yeah, but a lot of people will leave churches because they are offended at quote-unquote liberalism infecting sermons, right? There's one channel on YouTube I used to watch called Argent, who's a reactionary, who talks about how he left his Catholic church because he didn't like the messaging about tolerance to trans people or something along those lines. So a lot of these unchurched Christian nationalists were churched at one point. They were politically radicalized, and that made them leave the church. I think this is sort of a mistake to think that the church by itself was somehow a panacea to this. If anything, it just seemed largely helpless.
Religious and secular conservatives. A conservative is more likely to volunteer at a charity if they are religious. And in Europe, Christian religiosity tends to aid in making one less likely to vote for a far radical right party. What researchers are indicating is as religious belief declines, for many especially on the right, it does not also erode the identity markers or cultural symbols of Christianity as well. Many still hold to their Christian heritage and make this an identity marker, but without the core doctrines and beliefs. So the symbols and identity markers of Christianity are often transferred onto national or cultural markers and often become more political in their understanding. Philip S. Gorski said, "Loose from its religious moorings, religious nationalism floats free from the ethical tether of Christian ethics and drifts even further in the direction of secular messianism." Roger Brubaker said, "It is precisely the ongoing erosion of Christianity as doctrine, organization, and ritual that makes it easy to invoke Christianity as a cultural and civilizational identity, characterized by punitively shared values that have..."
Hang on. It's precisely the ongoing erosion of Christianity as doctrine, organization, and ritual. What does that mean as organization? Christianity is not an organization. And this is so ill-defined. What do you mean by Christianity? What do you mean by doctrine, for that matter? How are you distinguishing between doctrine and ritual, between organization and ritual? Christianity is a cultural and civilized... Like, is it because they're using grape juice in communion cups that Christianity is being eroded? What does this mean? Makes it easy to invoke Christianity as a cultural and civilizational identity characterized by putatively shared values that have little or nothing to do with religious belief and practice. I mean, they have almost everything to do with it. It's just they don't necessarily depend upon active belief in some specific, literary character, say.
little or nothing to do with religious belief and practice. This is backed by research on attitudes of immigration. Christian nationalists tend to favor less immigration and more restrictive measures. But a recent study found that the strongest anti-immigration attitudes are found among non-active Christians. The more religiously an active one is, the more Christian nationalism is magnified, and the more likely one is to align with anti-immigration sentiment.
That doesn't mean that having more... that doesn't mean that being more Christian has the inverse relationship. Not in a positive sense. It may be what you're noticing is that a lot of the people who hold these positions are not socially embedded in a meaningful way. Like when these people don't find peers when they go into a church building.
To quote, Christian nationalism may be powerfully operative among religiously inactive Americans. This suggests that religious identities and beliefs appeal to many Americans for their political and cultural meaning, and not necessarily their traditional spiritual intent. In Europe, many on the political right tend to be more likely civilizationalists, in that they wish to defend Christian or Western civilization from immigrants that are suspected of infiltrating Europe to change it from its traditional Christian heritage. It is often assumed that Christianity motivates anti-immigration sentiment. However, Kenneth Vaughan conducted a study which looked at the acceptance
Religious moral communities or secular tolerance.
of refugees at the individual level, regional level, and national level, and actually found at the individual level, Christians, with the exception of Catholic Christians and the unaffiliated, are relatively similar in their policy preferences regarding the admittance of refugees. Religious service attendance is associated with more generous policy preferences. At the national and regional level, percent unaffiliated is associated with more restrictive preferences.
Hang on. Christians and the unaffiliated are relatively similar in their policy preferences regarding the admittance of refugees. Catholics by generally will be pro-immigration. And then Protestants, I assume as a general rule, will have a similar attitude as the unaffiliated. National percent Protestant.
Additionally, greater religiosity was linked to support for inclusive immigration policy.
Unaffiliated doesn't necessarily mean not spiritual. I don't know what that means.
A 2017 study looked directly at anti-Muslim sentiment in Western Europe from before the immigration crisis, and found that, although more secularized countries are on average more tolerant towards Muslims and Islam, strongest anti-Muslim attitudes are nonetheless found among the non-religious in these countries. Roger Brubaker notes that what seems to happen is as Europe secularizes, and as religious beliefs and involvement decline, Christian symbols and identity markers are redefined in religio-civilizational terms, and this civilization must be protected from outside intrusion. Secularism is redefined as an ideology of the right, and the right is also appropriating liberal themes like gender equality and tolerance of homosexuality. The most secularized region of the world is being characterized in religio-civilizational terms. Christianity is redefined as a matrix of liberalism, secularity, gender equality, and gay rights.
What? I feel like these quotes were either taken massively out of context or there's something missing here.
Additionally, research indicates Christianity, and specifically Protestant Christianity, leads to more civil liberties, education, literacy, and democracy, and does not lead to more authoritarianism or extreme nationalism.
This is stupid. This is a basic correlation causation error. Like, there may be additional reasons for why these things correlate. It's not that one doesn't lead to the other. We just don't know. Does this video have a general statement? Eiko, your optimism is inspiring, but we are... Guess it is inspiring philosophy. Does it have a general... the thing you have to understand about inspiring philosophy is that he is to philosophy what if altist is to political theory. And here he's essentially doing political theory, and it's typical. The implied argument is that Christianity does not cause Christian nationalism. In fact, an increase in religiosity will result in a decline in Christian nationalism. So he's taking an anti-nationalist stance. However, to the end of expanding whatever the hell Christianity is taken to mean. Like,
If you want to reduce nationalism and authoritarianism, you should encourage more Christianity. You should encourage
there it
people
is.
to attend church and become more religious. It has been shown that historically,
like imagine telling, hey, you should become a Christian because it will make you less likely to become a nationalist. No, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Like, what is the argument here?
Protestants were catalysts for increasing literacy and education and spreading democracy around the world. Robert Woodbury says,
What?
conversionary Protestants were a crucial catalyst initiating the development and spread of religious liberty.
You mean they colonized the world? That's what you mean. You know, they didn't. Good God.
Mass education, mass printing, newspapers, voluntary organizations, most major colonial reforms, and the codification of legal protections for non-whites in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
Sure, but colonial reforms in colonies established by whom? Like it's great. It's great that indeed Protestant Christians were heavily involved in the anti-slavery movement, and were heavily involved in all of this nice stuff. But there's another side to this. The institutions that put those things in place beforehand were also Protestant, or were also religious.
If the Christian worldview led to authoritarianism and extreme nationalism, we wouldn't expect to see democratic institutions, a focus on education, and civil liberties to come out of Christian societies.
Well, no, it wouldn't bear on it at all. That's one factor among many. What actually happened is the history of Christian belief and Christian thought. And I don't even like that characterization because it's so non-specific. But the influence of things that you, inspiring philosophy, would characterize as such, resulted in the generation, or in the emergence rather, of specific types of institutions that, yeah, had a lot of positive qualities to them. We get liberalism, and from there we get a whole big ethical shift that allows us to have things like human rights and eventually like things like socialism, etc., etc. But it also lent to the emergence of a state form that was specifically vulnerable to these totalizing and totalitarianism, essentially. Like you need that particular, you need a specific kind of social form for that to even be thinkable, or for it to be desirable to certain people. Studies show that in the slave-holding South, people didn't go to church enough. Yeah. Who is this video even for? I don't know. These people don't make videos because they're just passionate about, like social science or politics or whatever. They make them because they're incredibly vain and they have an audience and it gets them money. Inspiring philosophy is one of the biggest hacks on this platform. He's an awful, awful human being.
But historically, the opposite seems to have occurred. Supporting the point Christianity does not lead to authoritarian ideologies. Woodbury notes the historical evidence indicates many Protestants helped people around the world fight for civil liberties and anti-colonial measures, like transferring power away from the British to indigenous people.
Hey, what were the British? Were they largely Christian?
Missionaries found that colonial abusers made mission work extremely hard. So in order to win more converts, Missionaries often fought against abusers.
Yeah, but the abusers themselves were also religious. Like, these aren't contradictory.
Missionary periodicals spread information about abuses to win more support for their causes, and ultimately ended many abuses committed against the native populations around the world.
By whom? Who were the abuses caused by? You can't just one-side this.
This is not to say missionaries always did the right thing or were always perfect. There are many examples of missionaries doing harmful things to indigenous people.
Yes?
But overall, Protestant missionaries appear to have been a force for good. Protestants also helped to advance literacy and education, being that it was necessary.
No, they were an amelioration at some level against, like, just raw exploitation by political and private actors. They weren't a force for good, just generally. Like, arguments in favor of slavery were also facilitated by religious language. This isn't... Oh, man. This guy be like the Crusades never happened and Templars are a myth. That one's a little... That's not exactly a counter to this particular case, because that was a conflict between religious groups.
To read the Bible. Protestant areas consistently printed more books per capita and exported more printed material per capita than Catholic areas. For many elites, mass printing seemed detrimental, as it would spread books to those not equipped to interpret or understand them. Protestant missionaries effectively changed this by forcing other groups to compete with how much printed material they put out. In Puritan New England, the settlers made a written alphabet in Algonquian so they could translate the Bible into that language and work to educate the American Indian population of New England, teaching them things like civil law and political theory.
Oh my god.
The abolitionist movement was largely run by Protestants who became convinced the Bible forbids slavery and organized
Teaching... Unbelievable. After this video, are you ending the stream? No, I'll stay on for a little bit.
boycotts around goods that were made using slave labor. Protestants also worked to educate local indigenous populations, unlike other groups, and dispersed power by developing and spreading new organizational forms and protest tactics. They encouraged democratic institutions, political organizing for rights, and extending equality to non-white populations. Missionaries spread SMO forms and tactics internationally. Early Protestant missionaries tried...
This is like brain melting. Okay, I'm not gonna... Let's not bother watching this anymore. Let's just think very quickly about what is actually going on here. Because the delivery form, it's actually a little bit consistent with what we saw with Jordan Peterson. That in itself is somewhat interesting. So what is he actually doing? So he gives us... He just throws out categories. Just nationalism and civilizationalism. And then he just throws out quotes that seem in isolation to support his thesis. And he throws pictures and sounds at you so that you can't actually think about it. Okay, what happens if I jump forward a little bit? Like, what am I going to see? Protestantism correlated with higher levels of personal freedoms. What does this have to do with Christian nationalism? Oh my god. For some reason, we're back at Hitler. Anti-religious sentiment has been found to be more distressing to individuals than to the research service. Okay, so we're getting into critics of his thesis, I guess, at the end. Let's see what he has to say here.
Christianity seems more likely to lead to democratic values, religious freedom, and civil liberties. So if you're an atheist or a non-Christian, and you're worried about the rise of Christian nationalism and authoritarianism, encouraging more secularization might not be the best approach.
That's stupid. That's just stupid. This guy is literally a Christian nationalist, but he's trying to know you while jumping through hoops to justify his version of Christian nationalism. Basically, yeah. You know what this guy is? He's just a boring Christian nationalist. When did we start? 2:30? Oh damn, we've been going for 2.5 hours. Yeah, this is just silly. Look, Bluestone, I know who Hake is. I know how bad it's gonna be. And I already sat through Peterson for over an hour. And then I sat through this. I don't know how much my brain can take. I think I want to go outside, I want to breathe some fresh air, and I want to forget this day ever happened. 5 minutes of Hake? We'll watch 5 minutes of Hake. 5 minutes. That's it. Don't say I don't do anything for you guys. And remember, totalitarianism is a small price to pay for abolishing sex. Alright, here we go. I hate you all. I hate you all so, so much. Oh god, that's loud. Why is it so loud? Who is this? The Crucible. Wait, is this a... This is the debate, I guess. I thought it was a modern day debate one.
Hey, take a second, shout your channel out, tell everybody where they can find you.
TheHakeReport.com. I'm live Hake on YouTube every morning, 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. And thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Andrew of The Crucible. And thanks for joining us, Vosh. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, long time on the Crucible. Been here many times. We're always happy to have you back. Vosh, this is your first official debate, though we've done an interview before. We're also happy to have you here on the Crucible. Shout your channel out to everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm Vosh from Vosh, which, as you pointed out, is pretty much all I can. Yeah, pretty much all I can say. Tragic that, but yeah, Vosh from Vosh. Delighted to be here as always. Hello again, Hake. Those jams were jamming.
Yeah, they're good. We have a great studio artist, man. He's fantastic. That actually comes. It's the Widowmaker from Wasp, our own rendition of it. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Wasp. It's kind of an obscure old metal band, but man, they laid down some good tracks. So to get started, each debater will have 5 minutes for their opening statement. Hake is going to be going first. Vosh will have 5 minutes to respond. We're getting to the cross-examination. Super chats will take priority tonight for the Q&A portion. We expect roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours total with the super chats in.
We're not going through
And
that.
Hake, go ahead, get us started.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I love this matchup. It's a great topic, this sexual morality thing, although I'm not sure I like the term. Vosh is one of the more, if you will, shameless guys that I know. He's argued in favor of pornography against the great Catholic intellectual E. Michael Jones recently. And I believe my first appearance on The Crucible was discussing rap culture. And I think Tupac said at one point, break out the champagne glasses and mother bleeping condoms. And I was saying that is immoral. Condoms are immoral. And I think Andrew told me,
Why?
he's a married family man. Well, what about condoms in the context of marriage? Maybe there's a time when women aren't supposed to be conceiving or something like that. And I don't understand it, but condoms, what about in that context? I'm like, no, that's gross.
just to cut in just for a second on your opening, I know that
Yes.
this is unorthodox to do, but I'm not ever wearing a condom with my wife, Hake. Anyway,
Nice.
go ahead, buddy.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. I don't think that there is there's any such thing as sexual morality, because morality is not sexual.
What?
There's only sexual immorality, and that's just another form of it. I think it comes from other immorality that's in our hearts. Yeah, all of us get evil into our hearts as we grow up, and as we get older, we get more and more corrupt. I think children and old people are naturally more non-sexual. They're just non-sexual. And you'll notice that a lot of evil people will try to sexualize children and sexualize old folks. And it doesn't fit. It's disgusting.
Hake has to be the most effective cure to any form of sexuality imaginable. This is actually like, I don't know what it is exactly. It's just, this is the most one of the most aesthetically gross expositions I've heard. Like, it bothers me.
Creepy, but children are innocent and free. And in old age, you're supposed to become wise and self-controlled. And in your so-called prime, you're supposed to be making the babies and making families and leading those families. Men are supposed to be leading their families in the right way. And sex is just it's not supposed to be the major thing that I think that it has become.
It's one of the primary drives of human beings, generally. At least one of the most intense ones for most people. It's responsible for creating the species. People can be horrendously harmed if they are abused in a sexual manner in particular. It's one of the most, like, important subjects for morality possible. Also, what a sad worldview. It's like, children are dumb, you do nothing but reproduce when you're an adult, and by the way, noodly armed people with beards like me are the boss, and then you're supposed to become a wizened samurai in your old age. Actually, that's better. That's kind of cool. But, like, you're just supposed to be temperate in your old age or something. And then you die, and that's it. That's it. You're just a bug. This is what closeted sexuality looks like. No, this guy is not asexual. This guy is deeply perverted. But he is not asexual. I am, of course, referring to Hake. There is something profoundly disturbed about his approach to this topic.
Sometimes people get hooked into things for a time, but you're supposed to overcome issues, not get deeper into them.
Like, what the
The
hell?
only non-immoral person.
Like, you're supposed to. You're supposed, based on what? What is the basis for saying this? Does that thought even occur to him?
For sex that I can think of is having children when a man and a woman are rightfully married. It's in the Bible, in fact, that God killed a man for pulling out, if you will. I heard it. It's quite gross.
That's incorrect. Actually, what it was Onan was commanded to give the wife of his deceased brother, was it deceased brother? Give the wife of his brother a child, and then out of spite he pulled out, and that's what it was. There's no story in the Bible that says that pulling out is bad. That's neither here nor there. That's just as a trivial matter of fact, that's incorrect.
Sex, you'll notice, it weakens men. The great Mick, the trainer Mick, told Rocky one time, women weaken the legs. And that is so true. I think all
What?
athletes know this.
What?
And it's not just sex, but it's the pornography and all that other junk that young.
Hang on, what the hell did he just say? I missed that.
The only non-immoral purpose for sex that I can think of is having children. When a man and a woman are rightfully married.
The only non-immoral purpose. Okay, so I went a bit back farther than I wanted to, but just that line is weird. The only non-immoral purpose for sex. You think this guy treats like eating that way? The only non-immoral purpose for eating. I guess just the bare minimum that it requires to bodily function at all, or to like sustain essential bodily functions. Like, that's weird. That's weird. You have this bodily function, but you must only use it exactly this much. Oh god, he's gonna argue that, isn't he? That's where this is gonna go. Okay, this got good again.
It's in the Bible, in fact, that God killed a man for pulling out, if you will. And I heard it. It's quite gross. Sex, you'll notice, it weakens men. The great Mick, the trainer Mick, told Rocky one time, women weaken the legs. And that is so true. I think all athletes know this.
Look, even Andrew's laughing.
And it's not just sex, but it's the pornography and all that other junk that...
Sex weakens men, which is why all famed warriors in history were abstinent.
Young males get into.
This is why.
And the women and
this
other
is why
evil
athletes don't have sex. They're all monks.
Use sex and perversion to control the men. I've heard it's even used in some cases from one country against another to weaken the men.
This is a man who's had a bad time of pornography addiction.
And it is no wonder that there's so much divorce and remarried because in part they were doing sex out of wedlock, and sex became too important. There's no respect for men. The women are not respecting the men. And there's no actual love for women because sex is not love. And there's no love in the women either. And men are kind of looking for love in the women, and that's the wrong place. I believe that the Bible even condemns putting it where it doesn't belong, in the exit-only area. And common sense, nature and nature's God says that's not right.
Nature says that.
LGBTQ alternative things aren't even real sex at all. It's just self-indulgence and maybe mutual exploitation, mutual indulgence.
Their identities. Being trans isn't even a... You can be asexual and trans. It's not... Okay.
But it should just... In reality, I think it should just be a minute and done. And it's because it's not love. Anything else, I think, is false idol worshiping of the body, which is... It's encouraged right now to get women to get all this pleasure or whatever like that. I think that that's just demonic. I think it's possession, and I think it's passion. And usually people who are getting...
This is like those memes where it's like, I don't know. What do you mean that's a small Coke? That's average, you know? This is like Mr. Girl saying that the average age of attraction for men is 14. It's like, this is yeah, I can imagine, Jake, that you think that the maximum amount of time it should take is a minute.
Get angry, they get more sexual, or if they get all excited, they're more sexual. You should be even tempered so you can have some self-control. People kill over sex. People who get become boyfriend, girlfriend, and all that stuff, relationships and breakups do not need to be so insane. And I think that this consent thing is ridiculous. You'll notice that the liberals and the female-minded emotional intellectuals think that consent is just about the only thing. Consenting adults is the common phrase, the only prerequisite for having sex. I think that's a red herring, because just because you're consensually exploiting each other doesn't make it right, and it's nothing to be proud of.
Okay, I'll actually grant like a millimeter of credit here. So I do think that there is more to sexual ethics than just consent by itself. I think like you need to be responsible about like the effect ultimately this will have on your partner to the extent that you can be aware of it. You should be putting the well-being of your partner before your immediate enjoyment, and just the bare fact that you've managed to acquire consent in the moment doesn't strike me as really sufficient in all cases. In all cases, to be very clear, to make a sexual engagement sort of ethically on the level, so to speak. But I don't know, man. Like, this is weird. Like when he says, like, you can imagine someone like in a there's something inherently perverse about a relationship in which, say, one partner is having sex to manipulate the other partner to get goods from them, and the other partner is simply using that other partner for sexual gratification, and as there's a total absence of any meaningful relationship beyond that. Like there seems to be something kind of hollow about that. And so like the bare fact of there being a mutuality, it's a stretch to say that it's inherently wrong. I don't know on what basis you would say so, but it does seem to it does seem undesirable on some level. But what he seems to be doing is saying that because you have any actual interest in sex itself, that therefore it's just intrinsically bad. Like it's corrupted by the devil or something, which is odd. Yeah, exactly. Real consent as opposed to the absence of resistance.
They're pushing pride like crazy. We're coming up on so-called Pride Month right now, the LGBTQIA plus Pride Month. What's to be proud of with that?
So-called pride, so-called month.
It's not something to be proud of. It's something to hide if it's something you're into, and to overcome quietly, not be blasting out for female-minded people to prop you up. Think about it.
What is a female-minded person? What does that mean?
The commie capitalist corporations and the phony politicians are all kissing up to the sexually immoral to promote wrong as right and tell you be who you are. That's not who you are. It's something that you got into, and you're lost, and you're not special. You're being used. Feeding the ego is dangerous. Don't fall for it.
Who's
I don't
he
know how much
talking
time
to?
I have left, but
You have a minute and a half, Haig.
okay.
Oh no.
Another
Shoot.
word for Satan, I think, is imagination. And pornography feeds that stuff. And I think that it's dangerous. Like any abuse, it tends to get worse. It draws people into darker and darker, more corrupt and...
Another word for Satan is imagination. You know what this is like? This is like in Atlantis when the Russian bomb guy is like, wait, did you just drink that? That's nitroglycerin. Don't move, don't breathe, don't do anything. Just pray. That's a terrible Russian accent, but that's how this guy treats the concept of organic life.
Twisted things away from what's natural and right into depravity. It makes at best, it makes undignified functional males and females just have this hang up, right? That they occasionally fall into. In worse, quote unquote, worst cases, it devolves into homosexuality, rape.
Oh, did he conflate being gay with being trans? Oh, I missed that.
Murder, all kinds of stuff. It puts the woman as God. You see these woman porn stars all talking politics like they know what they're talking about and trying to demand money from men and being all
Some of the most grounded political spokespersons, or not spokespersons, political commenters I've seen on this platform have done porn, oddly enough.
Degenerate and disgusting. She gets so full of herself, and then in the end, she's miserable. I think this is spread misery until the man flips out and kills the god that he made of her, or else he becomes her slave, and it's pretty disgusting.
I think you need to seek some therapy, dude. Vosh looks so happy. I mean, he's been served this on a silver platter.
There are many ways to be evil. It's not just homosexuality or child abuse or non-consensual things or stuff like that. We should aim for perfection and not be like, I'm not fill in the blank, like child molester or something like that. As if we're better. We're all in hell, giving hell to one another, and we should be overcoming that, not seeking revenge and gossiping and backbiting and getting into this stuff. I think we should avoid even the appearance of evil.
Okay. Thank you so much for that opening
Is
statement.
the explosives character Italian? I was sure he was Russian.
I did want to say, everybody, make sure you like and subscribe to the Crucible and do all that bullshit you're supposed to do to grow a channel, blah, blah, blah. I will say before I hand this over to Vosh for his 5-minute opening, this comment did catch my eye. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Right?
Yes.
I couldn't
Hang
help.
on, I have to sort this out. So, bomb character Atlantis. No, he is Italian. Vincenzo Vinny Santorini. He is an Italian explosives technician who serves as demolition expert of the expedition to find the lost continent of Atlantis. Oh, weird. I don't know why I thought he was Russian. Sounds like a Canadian biker dude.
But pull that one up. Vosh, you have
Indeed.
5 minutes on the table.
As so often seems to be the case, I'm left in the unfortunate position of not knowing whether or not I'm just surrounded by trolls, and I have no idea how seriously we're all taking this. But I'll try my best, see what I can do.
My word on it. It is serious.
I'll try to address this as substantively as I can. So when we talk about ethics, depending on the ethical system that you subscribe to, you are going to arrive at different conclusions about what is or is not moral. If you subscribe to a divine command theory, as I believe Hake does, the idea that like what is good is in the Bible and that's the end of it, I guess I would just be curious as to why Hake's positions seem to be more orthodox than those of essentially every religious society on earth. The perspectives that he holds here are maybe one or two of them you can find like commonly accepted in some of the more orthodox, like say Saudi Arabia or stuff, but all of them in tandem seem more like a caricature of what a secular person would create to make fun of religious people, which I guess is fine by me. It seems a bit odd to run things that way. I guess like to roll it back though, like, we say sex is for the purpose of procreation, and that's great and all, but I guess I kind of want to, and this is all I really care about. I want to work through the God in Hake's mind. God is everywhere, right? There's a little bit of him up there in your noggin, and I want to know, like, why is sex immoral? Like I want to understand this. So let's say that like sex is for procreation or whatever. Okay, explain to me, like, as a secular person, where does that logic come from? Because there's a lot of stuff that God prescribes in the 10 Commandments or whatever that totally makes sense to me. Thou shalt not kill, covet thy neighbor, blah, blah, blah. That makes sense. I can rationalize that. Why would God not want us to do these things? Well, it hurts people. We're his creation. You would look at, Earth and see, well, maybe life would be better if that wasn't the case. How on earth is not making women come making the world a better place? I want to know. I'm like, well, you didn't say you don't make women come. I think you said you don't want to do it for more than a minute. So I guess maybe you're very, very good. But yeah, I guess I want to know. I want to understand that. Like, would that be the ticket you'd run on as a politician? Like, no more female orgasms? How do you roll with that one? That's the main thing that I want to know. We can work from there.
All right, gentlemen, the floor is open. Wasn't quite expecting it to go this way, but fuck it, let's do it. Go ahead, Hake, you're up.
I think the ethics stuff comes from like common sense, and I don't know if sex is always immoral, but it's something dangerous not to be toyed with. And a lot of times we have this laissez-faire, oh, you should please the woman. And right now, that's part of the problem is in life right now in society that you see is this over eagerness to please the woman in one way, not just sexually. I'm talking about pleasing women, listening to them, catering to them, and
Lasting more than a minute, apparently.
letting them worry their pretty little heads about politics and stuff. All of this, there's a lot of kissing up going on. Sex, but I think it's self-evident. I think even you know that sex is not really a toy to just flippantly use.
I have a pretty casual attitude about sex for the most part. I feel like most of what you say about sex being potentially dangerous could be applied to literacy as well. This is one of the reasons why the Catholic priests during the Middle Ages preached in Latin, which was a language that wasn't understood by the flock that they preached to. Because they didn't want there to be like an understanding, like they just wanted to be like dogma accepted. So it seems like if we're going to shun social practices because they could potentially lead people down dark roads, we would be keeping everyone in cages. Isn't the point of humans being given free will that God gives us the ability to sin or not to sin? That this earth is the playground with which humans, His creation, determine their own moral worth and their eternal reward?
Well, I don't think we have free will, but that's a side point. And yes, I'm not looking to go the opposite extreme, if you will. And
You don't think you have, then what are you arguing ethics for? What's the point?
I do recognize that knowledge and women getting into education and even males getting into education can be so-called education can be poisonous. I have a T-shirt that says "Knowledge is poison" because
Are you
people.
a Calvinist? Sorry, just curious.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Wait,
I haven't really gotten into Calvin and all that stuff. I read about it, and I do think that we are chosen rather than we choosing God, but I'm not really sure.
Sky has a big interest in promulgating a very, very specific and very restrictive sexual ethic on strangers for someone with zero curiosity about the historical grounding of his own beliefs.
do you mind me asking what sect of the church you subscribe to?
I'm a non-denominational Christian. I grew up in a Presbyterian, but we weren't serious about being Presbyterians. It was just my grandma's church. And then I went to my brother's girlfriend's church. It was a friend's church, Quakers, but they were conservative, not the liberal kind. And now I go to J.C. Lee Peterson church with J.C. Lee Peterson at Bond.
Gotcha. Of course.
Yeah.
Brothers, right? Brothers helping brothers. It's interesting to have such an orthodox perspective on religious theory when you're non-denominationalist. Usually, non-denominationalist Christians are people who have a more laissez-faire attitude towards like biblical prescriptivism. They tend to be more of the live with Christ in your heart. Confess once every year type people.
No, I mean, I think a lot of the Bible, just a lot of the stuff that I referenced from the Bible, it rings true. And the stuff that I'm saying is not like you pointed out. It's not even
I just read Harry Potter and it felt right.
necessarily biblical stuff. It's some of it's just sort of, I think, common sense stuff, and especially the warning about. I mean, just look around at society today. If you had my quote unquote morals, you would be as horrified as I am at just the degeneracy of the people and the misery of the people.
Look, if you was me, we'd agree with each other.
Well, that's
And-
kind of self-evident, right? Okay, well, if you say like, if you believed what I believe, then you would believe what I believe, then yeah, sure. But I don't know. It seems like by a common sense perspective, like people would be fucking more, right? Like common sense perspective is people want to fuck biologically and it feels good when they do. So
See, the problem, Vosh, is you're assuming it feels good when they do. I guarantee you Hake's entire experience of sex is somebody else realizing they made a terrible mistake and intimating to him in the most polite way possible, this is not to happen again. Keep this to a minimum, please.
it seems
that's
like if
partly
anything,
why
you
I'm
need
not
kind of
for this.
arbitrary.
Like, that's partly why I'm not for this pornography stuff. I think that people should be coming together at a not an older age, like late 20s, 30s, 40s. They should be coming together in their prime and hopefully being mature spiritually, emotionally, and mentally mature at a young age, like perhaps we were more in the good old days. I think we were.
I hate like the notion of maturity that these people have. It's not like actual maturity. It's not, you know, depth and resilience and empathy and understanding. It's literally just we don't swear and we don't have sex. Great.
And responsible and having the children, so we don't need to be bringing in all this immigration and stuff like that.
You know, people actually had sex more often back in the good old days. Assuming
I
you're
believe
referring
it.
to the 1950s and 60s, they tended to have sex younger and more frequently than younger millennials or Zoomers do today, because people like are shut up inside their houses.
I
In a
know.
way, people not having sex is kind of an indication of social instability.
Yeah, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about not having sex. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be this thing that's worshipped, because right now it's worshipped more today, openly and shamelessly, than it was in those good old days when they were married and doing it right.
What do you mean by worship? Do you think we worship like
It's
pizza?
like, yeah, and sometimes in some cases, yeah.
Well, that's a
But
pretty broad definition of idolatry then, certainly. I feel
yeah,
like if anything, you're the one who puts sex on a pedestal because you think it's like this super special divine gift, and I think it's just like a
I
cool,
don't think
like
it's a
just
gift,
No, it's a
cool
punishment.
thing you can do, you know?
but I don't think it's a gift. I don't think it's this necessarily this. I mean, I have in my older days, and I might still think it. I have thought of
God gave us death to free us from sex.
sex as marriage, like because the two become one, and then you notice that. I know that you're casual about it. You may, but many people get hooked on each other after that, and not in a quote unquote healthy way.
Well, what's unhealthy? If two people like having sex casually, you know. Now, obviously, there are elements of a relationship that can go bad, of course, but that can happen in marriage too.
It's like health relevant to no body whatsoever. Like you can't just say it's unhealthy. It needs to be unhealthy with respect to something.
You know, that's hardly exclusive.
Right,
That
but
can
it's
happen in
also,
any kind of relationship.
I mean, you think about how the women today, many of them are getting older. They're past their prime. They've been doing the
I'm given to understand that women in all generations have gotten older.
so-called casual sex thing, but they've been taking birth control, messing up their bodies. And then when they come to find out they can't have babies, or they come out wrong or something like that, then they end up more miserable because they haven't done it the right way.
I think, I mean, you can
What?
usually reliably have children up into your mid to late 30s. And even after that, I think there's just like an increasing likelihood of some conditions. I don't know how frequent it is for women to like casually take birth control for 20 years, then stop, not knowing that that it was preventing them from having a kid, right? Like you're just like this is like a narrative, right? What if they just want to like fuck? What if they just want to get like railed at club parties or whatever, and
They
then
can
like
do
have a
that.
kid later,
They
or
can do
not at
that
all?
because people in their younger years can live in hell like that and think that they're getting away with it. But as they get older, especially the women, they become used up, if you will, and then they feel used, because that's all it is. It's just using each other.
Do the men feel used as well?
Oh yeah, yeah.
When
But
will
they
I
get away
start
with it
feeling
more,
used?
huh?
When will I start feeling used?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm 28, right? Like I'm not like young. Surely
Right.
eventually it has to kick in.
Well, man, I don't know. Different people have different symptoms
This guy knows that like King Solomon had multiple wives, right? Like he wasn't exactly celibate.
of their misery. It's not like you're a it's not like you're a joyful, peaceful person. You're not at peace.
I'm not at peace like
See, this is the weird thing. Like you could actually derive like the semblance of a point just from the statement that like consent is not sufficient as as the only ethical concern around sexuality, because human beings are very complex and you can harm somebody even if you extract consent, and I use that language very specifically. I guess not specifically. You shouldn't use other people to their own detriment as a means to your enjoyment is the general idea. Like that's a position you could take, but Hake's not taking that position because of actual care for the people involved. Hake's taking that position because for some indiscernible reason, sex disgusts him, and he thinks that people who engage in it are doing something wrong. The only reason he's given that I can discern is that is because it disgusts him. But then hake's kind of disgusting to most people, I think, so it doesn't... Hendra also brings up the age difference between Mary and Joseph at the end of To Hake. Okay. I don't know.
Reverend Peterson, I'll admit, I haven't yet attained that divine level of tranquility.
Wait till we talk about anal? What? Someone get me a timestamp. This is too long for this.
But you know, I'm working on it a little bit. I think I'm getting there. Yeah, I know a lot of people who do have the whole you know, trad wife.
Hake hates humans and especially women. I mean, he had me at the first half.
You know, like they marry at 22 or whatever.
Having spent 3 hours today watching the stuff that we've been watching, I can understand the first impulse. Second one, not so much.
And they're not too happy either. I really think it's just a person per person thing. What if people just want different things?
You know what? It does come down to your life, and you have to know for yourself what's right. I will give you that. But this whole what if you just want different things? That's just that's a laissez-faire. Like you're not offering any wisdom to the people.
What?
I agree that in and of itself isn't like really great advice, because you can say that about basically anything. But I feel like I don't know, like if you go back far enough, there would have been like socially normalized standards of marriage and sex that you and I probably wouldn't have liked as much, that we wouldn't have agreed with. And I feel like if we had made the argument then, like, hey, maybe we want to be able to do this, you know, like what we are asking for is freedom of choice, not a prescriptive thing for other people. If you want to marry, I would never stop you. But I feel like you politically kind of like hate the idea of people being...
Might stop her, though. That might be an ethical obligation.
Able to hook up casually when they're young, or at least it feels that way. And if that's the case, like, why can't they do it? If they want to make what you perceive to be mistakes, shouldn't that be their right?
I suppose so. I don't. We're talking about morality. We're not talking about necessarily prescription in terms of me ruling the world. So
Okay.
I think that I mean, we can get into that. I suppose, but I don't want to get too lost in that unless it's interesting.
Can we talk about anal sex then, if we're talking about morality?
Sure. I think that it's it's pretty vulgar, and it's
well, so just to cut in,
Yeah.
this is a debate on sexual morality, and if Vosh wants to bring up different aspects of what he considers moral or immoral about sexual morality, that's fair table, whether you think it's vulgar or not. Hey.
Yeah, no, I said it's fine. I just said it's kind of vulgar. That's just my reaction to it.
I'll keep it PG-13 with the descriptiveness. I don't get the obsessiveness with it, you know, in a negative sense, you know. Like, oh, it's vulgar. Well, frankly, sex in general is fucking disgusting. You know,
Yeah.
you get up close to a person, you're breathing really hard. That's life. But if people are having fun with it, you know, there's that what's the catchphrase? How is anal sex winning the culture war? Like everyone likes anal sex. Straight people like anal sex. Everyone's been doing anal sex for as long as people have been having sex and writing down how they had sex. It goes back.
That's not true.
Goes back way far. Anal sex? Like
you said
thousands of years
everybody.
old.
You said everybody.
Right,
Everybody's
every
not doing
group
that.
of people, not like every individual, but like every group of people.
I know that's why it's mentioned as no in the Bible, I believe.
Christians have been doing it for a while too. Otherwise, Catholics wouldn't be having the issues they've been having.
It's actually not mentioned in the Bible. There have been extrapolations from that to refer to it, but that's not what's mentioned in the Bible at all.
It seems to be a pretty broad predilection there. And why wouldn't it?
I think that's a false stereotype. I think that's a bit of an overly simplified false stereotype.
There is no line in any biblical text that specifies anal sex.
And you're right, Christians do wrong many times, but it doesn't. You're acting like it's something that's been accepted by people at large.
No, I'm just saying they do it anyway. You know, it's not like all Christians follow accepted doctrine.
Most people are evil. It's true.
What makes it evil? That's what I want to know.
I don't know what makes it evil, but instinctively.
What does that mean? Most people are evil. Like this man doesn't even have the barest interest in his own religion to know what Calvinism is.
It is. It's at least the disgusting normal sex produces life. This only produces death and.
What about Sodom and Gomorrah sodomy? Show me the line in the Bible that says that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was anal sex, such that you can say that sodomy refers specifically to anal sex.
Disease and cancer and all kinds of other stuff.
Does it produce death and disease? And cancer?
I mean, it's related, more frequently related to it, and in itself, it's disgusting and wrong. It's against nature.
Well, what's okay?
Exit only, man. Have some logic.
With regards to the cancer, I'm pretty sure one of the biggest causes of cancer is like HPV, which is a vaginal sex thing, or if you don't like piss after having sex. That's not an anal thing. Like that's from any kind of sex. In fact, funnily enough, are
you not aware?
Oh yeah.
If you'll let me interrupt, are you not aware that gay men have so-called gay men? I don't even like that term. Males
So-called
who are
gay
into
men.
that are getting or have been getting cancer and all kinds of stuff from. I heard that it's from that more often.
What?
Even Hunter Avallone said that, and he's all into facts.
Wait,
So
what?
Well, I haven't read every study Hunter Avallone said. I have no doubt. Listen, okay, gay people doing lots of wacky stuff. I'm sure a couple of them have found some sex act that gives you
more than a
cancer.
couple, man.
A few. A good.
How? I mean, maybe like an increased use of things like lubrication, perhaps, if there's some cancer-causing agent in that. But from the act itself, it's human matter. Humans don't give you cancer.
Good few. I've met a few. It's kind of irrelevant, like with the whole gay thing, though, because there are straight people who have quite a lot of anal sex themselves.
Yeah, it's wrong.
I mean, at the end of the day, like we can bite the bullet and say, even if anal sex was like dangerous or something,
it's not even real sex. You shouldn't even be calling it sex.
What does
what
that
should
mean?
we be calling it then?
I don't even know. It shouldn't even be. It shouldn't even exist.
Well, okay, what about blowjobs? I mean, that's that may not be an exit only hole, but it's definitely not
Yeah, I
one
don't think
intended
it's-
for reproduction.
Yeah, I don't think it's right. I don't think that men should trust anybody else to. That's disgusting.
But what do you mean by right? Okay, so disgusting. Like you kiss people, right? Like tell me you're okay with making out with women.
I think it should be avoided because that leads to other things. Unless unless you're married, I guess.
Okay, so
you shouldn't be just waltzing right into that type of temptation because it leads into other things.
But aren't all things temptation? Like, doesn't every kind of
It's
material
like-
pleasure potential?
At first, you're just looking at porn, and the next you're doing lines of coke off of that's.
Essentially lead one to want to try new pleasures, even high quality food. Gluttony is literally one of the seven.
I think, and I could be wrong, he's talking about Kaposi's sarcoma associated with AIDS. Yeah, but that's associated with AIDS. That's not from anal sex. That's from getting AIDS.
And sins right up there with lust. But
Yeah.
you would never say like, hey, don't eat tasty food.
You don't even necessarily get AIDS if you have HIV. Like that's the whole that's because they treat it now. They prevent it from developing into that.
Because it might lead you down the road to gluttony.
You might have a point there. I mean, maybe we should be avoiding that stuff. I mean, we should aim for perfection. But I think it's quite clear that people fall to temptation when they get to kissing like that.
Or if they eat a nice meal.
And okay, I mean, one wrong doesn't justify another.
Oh, okay.
This guy's like a Wes Anderson character. Like just the awkward silence and the dumb confidence. It's
okay. So you would concede then that it's a moral wrong to enjoy like a lobster dinner, because
it's
it's a precursor to temptation to gluttony.
I mean, most of the time when people eat a lobster dinner, they don't gorge themselves necessarily.
But it conditions you to crave the
Yeah, you should not.
material.
It's covered in butter. It's like one of the most unhealthy things you can have. What do you mean? It is gorging yourself.
Worship
Satiation.
food. Yeah, you're very right that people have a bad relationship with food and with sex, both.
It just seems like by this logic, you could.
But I'm not
fairly
saying it's
say-
immoral. I didn't say it's immoral to kiss. I said it's
Hey,
unwise. You're
hey,
feeding
you
into
gotta
temptation.
give Vosh a chance to respond though.
All
Oh,
right.
no, it's well, I mean, like one of the heavenly virtues is temperance, the ability to experience pleasure or some kind of earthly satisfaction, but not then go like, all right, I'm gonna ruin my fucking life with this thing, you know? Like you may be proud, but do not succumb to pride. You may eat, but do not be gluttonous. You may have sex, but do not be lustful, you know, all that
Right.
stuff. So it seems like if you have a hyper paranoid attitude about any of these pleasures leading to temptation, you have to deny yourself any kind of satiation. But that wouldn't, like, you couldn't lay claim to that because like you would be living like a monastic life, right? I mean, you would have to be like wandering the world with not but a cloak on your shoulders, you know, like taking food offered to you. Like that, the degree of like asceticism that you're talking about here is like Buddhist level, like the Buddha, you know, like
No,
it's
man.
way beyond what Christians do.
Right. I understand what you're saying. I'm not talking about going extreme and crazy, but I'm just it's a fair warning to people.
But why not? If you're biting the bullet on this one specifically, you're supposed to give away all of your wealth and just travel the wilderness and do good, right? Like that whole thing with the rich man. It's like, I want to follow you, Jesus. Okay, well, give away everything you have to the poor, and then you can. Then he went away sad. Like that. Guarantee you that this guy is in some kind of argument about communism versus capitalism, where he argues the reverse of that. Just guaranteed. It's. Okay, we've been going for 3 hours. I'm done. I get the idea. Let's just zoom ahead. Let's see what happens when we go up here.
Vosh says, under your moral values, it's almost monastic. I really can't help but agree in an extent. Don't you think you're going a little overboard with, you know, you can't go on a date and kiss a girl? Like, aren't we getting into the purity spiral to the point of absurdity here?
No, I don't think so because you can still hang out with a girl without kissing her. And I'm just saying because a lot of people, I think the kissing, I think it's common knowledge that it leads to other things. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying it may be unwise.
Okay, well, let me follow up with this at the 28
Yeah,
mark.
it's just the same thing. How did you carry on this conversation, or how did they carry on this conversation for 2 hours and 40 minutes? Like, it doesn't develop. Guy doesn't have the neurons for it. Oh, man. Oh, is that Big Papa fascist? Oh, that is. I didn't recognize him with the hat. Alright. I hate you all for making me watch this. I'm gonna go. Thanks everybody for suffering through this with me. Bye.